Hello again. um, so this video is going to be on some spiritual formation practice that I found in Exodus. This is modeled after the book Leaving Egypt by Chuck DeGroat. Yes, both of my first books in my Bible class have been taught around things that are from my future father-in-law. He is wonderful, and also I needed something to teach on, and he was somebody who I could ask, who I knew would have good stuff for me. Not every video will be stuff by him, but I will say Leaving Egypt is a fantastic book, something definitely to purchase. But with that, we're going to walk through some of what that book talks about with regards to Exodus. I'm going to have 5 different questions in this, or 5 different lists of questions. I would encourage you to pause the video as those come and journal out your answers to these questions. If not, that's okay. You just want to pay attention and come along. That's great. So, the book of Exodus, the story of the Israelites throughout the entire Old Testament is actually the story of us. They're God's chosen people. They are who God uses for his mission. Through Jesus Christ, that has become all believers in him. So we are now God's chosen people. So our idea of taking the Old Testament and applying it to our lives is by saying we are God's chosen people. How can we recognize what God's purposes were for the Israelites and apply it to ourselves today? One great place to do this is in Exodus. Analyzing all of the pieces of their story and saying, what are the things that apply to me about this story? So the first question I ask you is, what is your Egypt? For lack of simplicity, this is kind of what are the idols that you're experiencing now. However, I think idols has kind of a negative connotation. So what is your Egypt? Egypt was originally a place of comfort for Joseph and his brothers during a time of famine, but eventually it became a place of enslavement through the generations for the Israelites. Often in life, we have things like this that soothe us, that are comfortable at the time, but eventually they become an enslavement. You think of something like a relationship gone awry. Originally, it was something that was the best thing in your life. It was making you comfortable, everything like that. But upon getting too over obsessed into the relationship or anything like that, you might realize that it has taken over your life in certain ways and you've missed out on other things. This can happen with literally anything in life. That's just an example. So what is that thing for you that was just a comfort but has become an enslavement for you? An easy way of thinking of this is thinking of, okay, what's on your mind the most? What are you using that's to make you comfortable, but actually at the end of the day is kind of enslaving your time, your resources, your energy? This could be work. This could be a relationship. This could be something else. There's plenty of different things that it can be. So I have the questions at the bottom. What is your Egypt? What's the thing, person, or place that you go to for comfort that becomes what you're dependent on instead of God? Think about what takes up your most time and thoughts. Pause this video here if you're wanting to journal, and journal your answers to those questions. So, in order to be in full communion with God, not that God is shaming us to do this, but in order to be in full communion with him, we, for the betterment of ourselves and the better for our lives, we want to leave our Egypts. We want to leave them behind in certain ways. And that doesn't mean even necessarily totally leave behind. If work is taking up too much of your life that you're not able to be in communion with God, that doesn't mean horribly abolish work. It's just, hey, how can we live healthily into it so we can actually be in communion with God? Who's a person that could help you do this? Who is / could be your Moses? Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. Who's a mentor that you could do this with? I have some questions on the screen. Again, take a pause and journal what you think a good mentor for you could be. After that, we have what the Exodus represents in the story for us, applied to us. Exodus 14 verse 14, probably my favorite verse in Exodus, says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." Leaving Egypt. What do we have to do? God is obviously doing a lot to help us leave our Egypts, but what do we need to do? All we have to do is cooperate. We need to ask God to come into leaving our Egypts with us, finding healing and deliverance from our idols, from the things that take our place in Him, the things that harm our flourishing as humans. We need to practice telling ourselves the truth so we can call on others for accountability in these things and prayer. But ultimately, God is the one who's going to change our heart. So allow Him to do that. So the questions that go along with the Exodus are: think of your deepest desires in life. What are some ways you can trust God with this struggle? What are the things that you're so closely holding on to? But how do you desire God to meet you in this? And what do you desire to see God do? How do you desire God to help you leave your Egypt, your idol, and focus more wholly on Him? After that, we get to Mount Sinai, the next period of Exodus that I'm going to apply to our lives. At Mount Sinai, people see God's presence, but when Moses was gone for a long time, they start to doubt. They start to freak out, and they make the golden calf. They turn to another idol to save them, the golden calf. So my challenge to you is to apply this to your life. When you start getting scared, what are the things that you tend to turn to for comfort and help? Identifying these helps us to be able to understand different patterns that we have, and often when we go to these things that soothe us, that can be kind of feeding the beast of making you actually more anxious because you are doing it over and over again, and it continues your pattern of obsession. After that, the last is the Promised Land. The Promised Land is the place that Exodus looks forward to. They never reach there in the book of Exodus, but the Promised Land is where we fully live in communion with God. You have left your Egypt, you have gone through your wilderness season, and now you are headed towards the Promised Land. What's your Promised Land? When do you feel closest to God? What activities give you the most joy? Just to wrap this up, often God brings us out of something that we're struggling with just to be in the wilderness for 40 years. And we think we're going to be all good, but we end up in the wilderness for 40 years. Leaving your Egypt, leaving your idols behind takes time and patience and prayer and a calm and gentle soul to walk with you through it. It took the Israelites 40 years to get the Egypt out of them. We need that time and patience as well, and God has that time and patience for us too. You don't need to painstakingly force yourself to immediately leave every single idol and everything behind. We're human. We're not perfect. But allow God to be invited into this walk with you. Know that you're going to have a wilderness season, and acknowledging the things that you are doing wrong right now is going to be a painful and long experience. Often you're going to want to go back to your work, your Egypt, your relationship that gave you so much comfort. The Israelites constantly wanted to go back to Egypt. Often the wilderness feels worse than Egypt. But know that God is bringing you to the Promised Land. Thanks for paying attention.